Hello, hello, good afternoon. It's Monica from Life is Art, and this is the Thursday 3:30 p.m. demo at the Let's See New York online crop. And I'm just checking my video here, making sure we're going. And I was trying to sort out the problem we were having with the brightness earlier, and I couldn't figure out how to do it. My husband offered to help, but it was while we were doing chat and craft, and I didn't see his message. So I will have to get him to look at it later. But in the meantime, what I did was I just shut off most of my lights. So hopefully that will help. If you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching on replay, you can say replay. We are looking at our new November-December catalog, and specifically the collection for this month is Silver Bells. But for this particular demo, I'm actually going to be using the Mix-in papers. Let me just find them here. I'm going to be using the Mix-in paper pack. As well, I'm going to be using the triangle stamps. Let me just see if I can find those. I didn't even mark my page. There we go. We're going to be using the triangle tree stamps. And if you're joining me live, just let me know how the brightness is, whether I need to add more lights or if it's looking okay. I don't want everything to be in the dark either, but I don't want it to all be too bright. So we're going to be using some of that. We're also going to be using the stamp of the month for November, which is called Thanks a Bunch. And so, yes, so we're going to be using a lot of things. So let's get started. We want to start out with a base for our card that is 4 1/4 by 10 1/4. So 4 1/4 by 10 1/4. Hey Joanne, nice to see you're watching. How's the brightness on so far? Are we able to see things? I turned off all but one of my lights to keep it from being too blown out from the new camera. So we've got 4 1/4 by 10 1/4, and we're going to do some scoring on this. And I'm using pine cardstock, which is a lovely dark green. Joanne says, so far so good. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. And we're going to do some scoring on this 4 1/4 by 10 1/4 piece. And we're going to score it at 3 1/4. Hey, Deborah. Yes, it's looking good. Okay. Yeah, I basically just shut off all my lights. I've got my ceiling light behind me, and I've got one single light bulb above, and we're just going to have to go with that for now. So 3/4 of an inch, we've created a score line along this 10 1/4 inch side. So that was 3/4 of an inch. Now we're jumping over to 4 3/4. 4 3/4, and we're going to score that. Then 5 1/2. And then the last score line will be at 9 1/4. No, sorry, 9 1/2. I was going to say 9 1/4, but I meant 9 1/2. So let me run through those again. We have scored at 3/4 of an inch, 4 3/4, 5 1/2, and 9 1/2. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to crease on all those score lines, and I want my outside to be this dark side. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold with the light sides together, starting with the first score line, making sure it's nice and even top to bottom. And then we're going to go to the next score line, folding it with the light sides together. Good afternoon, Laura. Nice to see you're watching. And then we're going to go to the next score line, and we're going to fold over like this. And then our final score line, we can just fold it over with the light sides of the cardstock together. And if I hold this up, you should be able to see the difference between the light and the dark. It's a nice little bit of contrast there, which is great when you want to have two colors that are very similar. So one of the challenges today, I believe, involved the card challenge. It was sort of like an ombre using cardstocks. And so this is one way to get some nice variations for an ombre, is to use the light and the dark side of the cardstock. Okay, so now we're going to flip back over to our front side of our card. And in this first large section here, we're going to skip over the little 3/4 of an inch tab down here. But in this first large section, I want to add a piece of pattern paper from the mix-ins. And it's this piece here that's the sage with the little tiny evergreen little spriggy tufts all over it. It's a very nice, soft, subtle pattern. I'm just waiting for the camera to catch up with me. So yeah, there we go. And this has been cut to 4 inches by 3 3/4. And I'm just going to go ahead and stick that on the front of this panel. And I'm going to make sure that I get some adhesive all the way around the edge. So I'm going to do all 4 sides, which is not something I usually do, but you'll see why in a moment. So we're going to go all the way around, just like that. Then we're going to take our backing off. You could use glue, but for what I'm going to do, I think it's actually better to not use glue because it'll get kind of messy. You'll see. And then we're going to center it in this section, just like that. And then I want to bring in one of my favorite tools that I use all the time. It's a go-to for many, many projects, and that is my circles thin cuts. They've been around for years and years, and they're still available, and they're just incredibly useful because there's nothing harder to cut than a circle. And I'm going to use the largest one, which is a 3-inch circle, and I'm going to put it on my card, and I'm just going to kind of suss out where the center of this pattern paper is. Grab a couple little pieces of washi tape so that I can stick it down, because we're going to run it through the die cut machine, and I don't want it to move because I want it to try and stay as close to the center as possible. So there we go, a couple little bits of washi on there. And then let me grab my machine. And we're going to run this through. Now, I really only have to run this end through, so I'm just going to put it in and then run it in like that and bring it back so we don't have to run the whole thing through. There we go. And now we can move this out of our way. Don't think we need it again, but we might. So it won't go too far. So there, now we've cut out a circle through both our pattern paper and our cardstock. And we can, of course, save this for a little embellishment somewhere else, as long as I don't rip the washi tape off too harshly. And so we can save that for another project, set that aside, put your die back on the magnetic holder so that it doesn't get lost. They have a tendency to get lost. And just where this camera is, I'm a little bit shifted over from normal, so I keep finding myself having to shift. Hey Laura, nice to see you're watching, and I see my mom is watching. Hello, hello. I think I might have said hello to Laura already, but just in case I hadn't. Okay, so we've done that, and now what I want to do is I want to show you that this is going to kind of all fold up and create a little box. It's going to create a little box like that. And so this other large panel on the inside is going to be visible through this hole. So what I want to do is I want to put a piece of paper in there to add a little bit of brightness because it's a little dark in there. And so I have a piece of pattern paper from the Mix-in collection, and it's the little tiny charcoal dot. And I have cut this to 4 1/8 by 3 7/8. Now, you could always do 4 by 3 3/4. You could do that. But I did 4 1/8 by 3 7/8. Yes, 3 7/8. And what I want to do with this is I'm going to bring in that triangle trees stamp set, and I'm going to stamp up one of the trees on here. And I've already got it loaded onto my platform so that hopefully it's in the right spot where I want it. And I'm going to kind of stamp it a little bit up and to the left. And I kind of practice this ahead of time, so I know where I'm going to put it. You could also freehand this, but I wanted to make sure I got it in the right spot. So I'm going to ink this up with some pine ink because it's a tree. It's an evergreen tree, and so we might as well go for some green. And we're stamping right on the pattern paper. So just going to ink that up well, and then we can just close this and stamp it on down there like that. And that's our first little tree. Now, if you were watching right from the very beginning, you would have heard me say that we are creating a diorama card. And a diorama card involves a little scene. So we're going to have a little wintry evergreen scene happening here. And we're just looking around because, there we go. I lost where I put my, my adhesive. So let's go ahead and we're going to adhere this inside on this large panel that doesn't have the hole in it. We're going to center it on here. And this is where those fold lines come in handy, because you can kind of lift one up and get a good eye on where we need to put things. There we go. Now, because we're doing sort of a winter scene with evergreens, I want to add a little bit of a snowdrift happening inside of our card. So I've got a piece of white daisy, and that I've cut to the same width, that 4 1/8. It doesn't have to be precise, but what I've done is I've cut it at about 3 1/4 inches tall. And if I put that on there right now, my poor little tree would entirely disappear. So what I want to do is I want to create kind of a snowdrift, and I'm just using my tree as my guide. So I want to have my snowdrift be about that high, which ended up being just under 2 inches, just a smidge. And I'm creating a snowdrift, so I'm going to tear the paper, and I can make it go up, I can make it go down, and it can make its way. Now, this is the side I want to keep, and I want to have a torn rough edge, so I'm pulling the part that I'm not going to use right away towards myself, and that creates the lots of tear out on this side. And then if we bring it over here, we can take a look and see if we have enough of our tree showing. I think I want a little bit more, so I'm going to go ahead and tear a little bit more of this off. And, you know, when you're tearing stuff, you can just kind of judge it yourself, how you want it done. So there we go. We have a little bit more of our tree showing. So let's add some adhesive to this along the bottom edge. Now, I am not using foam tape in my diorama. Some people might, because they want to add dimension, but I want mine to be able to fold up as flat as possible to go in the mail, so I'm not going to add any foam tape. And we're just going to attach that right at the bottom of that pattern paper. Okay. Then our next step is we need another little tree. We really do. So let me just grab the other little tree I want. And it's this one that has the little lines on it. And we're going to stamp it on some white cardstock. Did I leave a little piece out for me to stamp on? I did not. So let me grab one out of my drawer. A little scrap paper. I always keep all the little scrappy bits in my drawer. We're not going to get rid of this torn piece yet because we're going to use that. And I want to stamp this in pine as well. Let's ink that up. You can stamp it down here. Now I do have die cuts for these trees because you can buy the triangle tree die cuts. They're currently not available, but they will be available soon again. But you know what? For this triangle, because it's got a straight edge on it, I'm just going to fussy cut it because it's just as quick as me taping down a die and running it through the machine and doing all that. I might as well just go around the 3 edges and do a poor job of fussy cutting it, as I might say so myself. But there we go. We have our second little tree. And we're going to go ahead and tape it down. Like so. I don't know if you've seen in the video, I've got a bruise on my arm. I had to have some blood work done last week. And so if you see that, that's what that is. Nobody's been pinching me. It's all good. Just getting blood work done. So now what I want to do is I want to kind of double check that I'm going to get my tree in the right spot to see it in my little scene that I'm creating. And so I'm just going to kind of close that circle a little bit and tuck it right in there. Just like that. Now we can take this other piece that we tore, flip it over, and see how it looks against that tree. Now I think that's a little bit high. We want to come down just a little bit. So we will just go ahead and tear a little bit off there like that. And check it out again. That's looking mighty good. So we can go ahead and add this other torn piece. So that's nice. We started out with the one piece of white daisy and we were able to make both of our layers for our little snowdrift. Now you could add a little bit of inking on the edge of this if you wanted to make it really stand out. I'm keeping it pretty subtle today. And we're just going to add that right on there like that. Okay, now we need one more piece. And did I cut the piece for this? I think I did not, because I wasn't paying a lot of attention. So let me see how this scrap piece stands up. It's pretty good. What we're going to do is we're just going to use this scrap little piece. Now this piece should probably be the same width as this, but it's okay that it's a little bit narrower. We're going to just trim off a little bit here, about 1.25 inches of height, because we want to do a little more tearing. We want to create a nice little scene for one more tree. So we're going to just kind of tear this across like that. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to bring this circle down, and we want to have it in behind that front circle. So all I need to do is add a little bit of adhesive down at the bottom. So this piece, if I was measuring it out, would be 4 1/8 by, yeah, do 1 1/4, and then you have lots to grab onto to do the tearing. So there we go. Just add our adhesive on there, and I've actually added it to the wrong side. I actually need it to add it to the right side of the paper, because it's the right side that's going to stick on here. So we're adding it right onto the back of this so that it shows through the hole like so, and creates a little snowdrift in the front. So now we've got 3 layers of snowdrifts and trees going on. Let's add one more tree to this inside. And I'm going to grab this one that has the nice little swaggy garland going across it. And I've got a piece of the pine cardstock. I'm using the light side, and I'm going to give it a little dust with my anti-static pouch, and that should give you an idea as to what we're going to do next. Any guesses? Any guesses at all? We're also going to bring in a piece of scrap paper, and we're going to bring in our Versamark, and we're going to bring in our white embossing powder. Yes, we are going to heat emboss. So let's ink this up with the Versamark ink and stamp our tree. Now, if you'll notice, I'm stamping my tree a little bit up from the bottom. If you can see that in the camera, I don't know if you can, but I'm stamping it maybe ½ an inch up from the bottom of my piece of pine cardstock. Now, this particular tree, we're not going to use the thin cut for either. And this one is on purpose, not just because it's quicker, but because I need to create a little tab at the bottom to adhere it to our little diorama. Dump our embossing powder back in, put the lid back on, always important when you're working with the embossing powder, because it's inevitable that the time you don't put the lid on is the time you'll bump it and spill it, and it will make a big mess. All right, let's bring in our heat tool, get it warming. This is the time where you just take a little pause, a little breather, and you'll notice that I'm holding my heat tool sideways. I'm not blowing it at my table. I'm lifting my paper up off my work surface and then applying the heat to it and just letting that hot air blow across the cardstock. And you will see that embossing powder change from dry and powdery to shiny and white right before our eyes. There it goes, starting to go. And I'm also pointing it away from my hand so I'm not burning my fingers, because it does get pretty hot. It's hotter than a hairdryer. There we go. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now, for this to be attached, we're going to do a little bit of cutting, but I also need to remove some of the dusty from the anti-static pouch, so I'm just going to rub it on my pants and get rid of some of that anti-static starchy dust. And to cut this out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow along, leaving a halo around the tree. But you notice I didn't cut across the bottom, so I'm doing that on purpose. This is super good fussy cutting for people who don't like fussy cutting, because it's totally simple. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that amount of space at the bottom of my tree, and that will act as the tab that I can use to adhere my tree inside my diorama card. So now all I need to do is put some adhesive on here. Now, this is a spot where somebody might decide to use foam tape so that there's a little bit of distance between the white snowdrift and the tree, but because I'm trying to keep mine as flat as possible, I'm not going to do that. So let me just tuck that inside, kind of fold it up a little bit, and this is where you just kind of got to hold it and play with it. I'm going to have my tree a little bit to the left of center and hopefully straight-ish. There we go. Just glue that down, and of course it's not connected, so we can just squoosh it down. And now when it's folded up and you look at it from above, because that's the view you have, you can see we've got a nice big tree in the front, we've got our snowdrifts, our trees in the back, creating a nice little scene in there. And now all we need to do is attach these two together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up like this, and on this tab that's pointing up, when it's all opened up like this, so we're going to add a couple strips of adhesive on there, and then remove the backing, oops, like that. And then all we need to do is fold it right at the top of this panel. And then all we have to do is fold this panel over from behind. And just adhere it like that. Excellent. Looking good. Got a little bit of a bubble there. But I think that's okay. So we've got our little box done, but this is not our card. This is only part of our card. So we need another piece of our pine cardstock, and this has been cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And we are going to put some adhesive on the bottom of this little rectangular box that we've created. So we're going to push it up. We're going to add some adhesive to the bottom. Just like that. And you could use red tape for this if you wanted. I don't think it's necessary, but you could. And now with the dark green facing up, and this one with the trees facing up, we're going to turn it over, and this part where we have the adhesive is going to line up on the very end of this card base. Make sure it's straight from side to side, and we're going to stick it down just like that. And then when we open up our card, we have this cute little diorama that just sits up and creates a really fun display, just like that. Okay, so now we need to do a spot where we can write our message. So for that, on the inside, we're going to use a piece of sage cardstock, which coordinates with the pattern paper we've used here. And this has been cut to 4 inches by 3 3/4. We're going to do a little bit of stamping on this. And this is where I'm bringing in the stamp of the month called Thanks a Bunch. And I kind of looked through here to find a sentiment that I really liked. And so I'm going to be using the thankful on the front. And then on the inside, I'm going to be using this one that says, for all the ways you brighten my life. And I'm going to stamp that in pine because we're just keeping it simple. We're using pine for all of our stamping other than the Versamark. So we're going to ink that up. And we're going to stamp it up towards the top a little bit so we leave some space for writing our message. We can give that a rub off with the stamp chamois. And then I also want to add a little bit of trees in here because this is kind of a tree-themed card. So I've got this little tiny tree from those triangle trees stamp set. And I'm going to stamp one over there, one over there, one in the middle. This is how we're going to make a cute little border. And then one in between each of those on both sides. And try not to get all the pine that I picked up on the ink block onto our card. You should always do lots of stamping direct to card right when you're, near the end of creating a card, right? Always. So let's add some adhesive onto the back of here. Hey Lynn, how's it going? Hope everybody is having a great day. We're traveling around in New York today. We're going to visit Queens. So once we're done our video here, you're going to see some stuff posted about Queens. And let's add this. I just want to double check my spacing. We're going to add this right up tight to that crease here, just leaving a little tiny 1/8 of an inch so that when it's closed, that sage piece is completely hidden behind the part that folds down. Then in this little space at the bottom, I'm going to bring in another pattern piece from the Mix-in collection. Is this beautiful Desert Rose plaid, and we're just going to adhere that onto the front. This is a 1/2 inch by 4 inches, I believe. Yes, a 1/2 inch by 4 inches. And we're going to center that in the space that's left down at the bottom, creating a nice little strip. And then also adding in a piece of the same pattern paper that's on the inside. We're going to attach to the top of the box, which is easier to do when it's laying down like this. I might actually add a couple pieces of adhesive to this one, because that's going to be handled a little bit more. There we go. There we go. So again, same size, 1/2 inch by 4 inches. And we're just going to center that on this portion. And then let's repeat that beautiful patterned paper up here on the top. And this piece has been cut to 4 inches by 3 3/4. I'm going to add that on. Just kind of repeating the pattern. Sometimes if you get too many patterns, it can get a little much, especially since we've got all the trees happening. So I wanted to keep it to just a couple of patterns, just that sage pattern and this plaid, which I think is gorgeous. Desert Rose wasn't a favorite color of mine because, as you know, blues are my favorites, but it looks gorgeous with this pine and sage combination that's happening. Then we want to get ourselves another tree. We're going to decorate the front with yet another tree. And again, we're going to do some heat embossing on this one. So we've got a piece of the pine. This time we're using the dark side of the pine. We're going to add some anti-static pouch to that. Grab our scrap paper again. We could have done this at the same time as the other one, but I didn't think of it. White embossing powder, Versamark ink. Now, I find that people sometimes forget about heat embossing. It's not something that's kind of their go-to thing. And one way that I have found to kind of encourage me to use it more often is to keep the supplies on my desk. And then when I'm thinking about using a dark paper, I have a tendency to go, oh, that would look good with heat embossing. And if I put it away and I had to get it out every time, I don't think I would use it as much. So if you find that you don't do heat embossing very much, but you like doing it, then maybe give that a try. Leave your supplies. And what I usually do is I have my anti-static pouch. I throw the Versamark. I throw my embossing powders in there, and it just sits off on the side of my desk. It's all just there. Now, some of you obviously have more supplies than that, but that works for me. So we're going to go through this same process again with our heat tool, just applying the heat to our card. We'll see you later, Laura. How's it going, Michelle? Are you home from work now or joining from work? I saw you on earlier. We were joining from work. Or maybe that was yesterday. Oh my gosh, the days are blending together. So we're just allowing that heat to blow across the cardstock, and I can see it's starting to change. So exciting. There we go. My daughter found out about the joy of heat embossing, and she had to make a bunch of Christmas cards for family and such one time, and I think every single card had to have heat embossing on it. Oh no, Michelle, you're homesick. Oh, that's a way to get a day off, but it's not recommended. So again, I'm doing my fancy dancy way of getting that anti-static pouch powder off by rubbing it on my pants. And now I'm going to bring in the triangle dies to cut this one, because it's going to go on the front of my card, and you know, we'll be fancy. And we'll do some die cutting. Now these triangle dies, like I said before, they are currently unavailable, but they will be available again. And so keep your eye out for that if it's something that interests you. I was super excited to see triangles because inevitably you have a project where you need triangles, and it's kind of a mathematical quiz when you have to make triangles. So I think having dies are fun. Now, it's not, you know, all the different kinds of triangles. This is a, what would that be called? An isosceles triangle? I don't know. There's right angle triangles and isosceles triangles and all those things. Somebody who's geometry inclined would probably know. There we go. There's our little tree, and I'm going to pop the die back onto my magnetic sheet. Move my die cut machine. And here we are going to use a little bit of foam tape. Hooray! We get to use the foam tape. And for this, I'm going to use the thin foam tape and add a little bit up here and a little bit across the bottom and one more snip over there. Looks good. We're not going to do a whole lot of decoration on the front. We're going to put our tree on there, maybe some bling. I can always be convinced of putting bling on here, and of course our sentiment. So let's kind of have this a little off to the side, I think, like that. And then we have our sentiment that we're going to use from our stamp of the month, and we're going to use the big word thankful down here. And I have cut a piece of the sage cardstock to 3 1/4 inches by 1 inch. Whoops, I've got it loaded on my block, and I've got my pine ink again. Just ink that up, stamp it. Okay, I gotta come closer to myself so I can see. Stamp it in the center. Pardon me. I think I got some of that anti-static pouch powder in my throat. Gonna take a sip. 1 second. And of course, because we've made a nice little banner, we're gonna do some dovetailing. We're gonna snip right in the middle at the center of the side, and then come in from the corners, oops, to the top of that snip, like that. And then we're going to turn around. We're going to snip. My eye is watering, can't see. Snip in the center, and then from the corner to the top of the snip, and then again from the other side, from the corner to the top of the snip. Lovely. Okay, so we're going to add that onto our card, and we'll use a little bit of foam tape for that. Let me grab this. Oh, my eye is watering, so now my nose is running. Now I'll have the sniffles. We're going to add a little bit of thick foam tape right there, and then on the part that's going onto the tree, we're going to add a little bit of thin foam tape, like that, so that our thicknesses are not conflicting with each other. And just going to add that right down near the bottom, offset to the right. And where did we put the fun bling? Bum, 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 bum. Oh, there we go. It's in. I try to keep all my things in the same package. We've got our Silver Bells dots that I'm loving. And for this one, I'm going to use the white ones because it will coordinate with the little white dots on our tree. And let's add one up here, and then a couple down here, just like that, creating a nice little visual triangle. And there is the front of our card, thankful. using the pine as our base, and also for our tree, some white heat embossing, those beautiful dots. We've got our gorgeous plaid from the Mix-ins, as well as this sage spriggy pattern from the Mix-in collection, using the sentiments from the stamp of the month stamped in pine on sage. And then when we open up, we have the rest of our sentiment for all the ways you brighten my life, a beautiful little row of trees, and then of course our cute little diorama created with the layers of torn white daisy to create some snowbanks, and stamped out those trees. And I think that is super cute, using the circles die for the whole, and super fun. And then your recipient can of course stand it up and display it like this, or leave it folded up if they're going to, you know, hang it up. Some people do that with, especially with holiday cards. They have the lines where they hang them up or put them on the wall. But I think that is so cute. And you could, of course, add any extra little sparkle or bling on there that you would like. But again, try to keep the inside as flat as possible so that it goes into your envelope and it will fit in the standard 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card envelope. And so I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that diorama card come together. I know it's a little bit longer video than normal, but there's, you know, a few little details in there to work out. All right, so we will be back on at 7 o'clock for Chat and Craft, and there will be another game posted before the end of the day. And have a wonderful afternoon. Toodaloo. Bye.